So we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Teacher Discovery Webinar, IPAs, Create Authentic Learning Experiences. My name is Elaine Swope.
And I'm Melissa Creamer.
Okay, so to just go over the outcomes of what we would like to cover this evening. So participants will be able to identify what an IPA is and isn't. You will be able to become familiar with the structure of the Integrated Performance Assessment, learn tips to develop daily lessons that help prepare students for the IPA, and finally learn the benefits of the IPA and how to use them in your classroom. Right. Okay, so what is the IPA?
All right, well, an IPA stands for an Integrated Performance Assessment, and it is a summative assessment that's given at the end of a thematic unit that you work on throughout the quarter. And it assesses the three modes of communication. So you will have either a listening or a reading, and then that would be the interpretive part of it. And then you will have a speaking, and then you will also have a writing. So those would give you the three modes of communication.
Okay, so to go a little bit more in depth, so as Melissa said, the assessment consists of a reading or a listening, so that is your interpretive. That interpretive, you will create the assessment on the ACTFL template that consists of 9 activities, followed by your interpersonal task, which is your either speaking or writing, and then your presentational task, which is, again, your speaking or writing. It is based off a curricular or cultural theme and essential questions. So that theme makes up your unit, and then the essential questions are what you would like your students to be able to do at the end of that unit. So sometimes you might have one essential question, or there could be more. The IPA uses authentic resources. So a resource has to be, well, definitely should be made by a native speaker for native speakers, engaging for your students, and level appropriate. The IPA incorporates the target culture by the use of those authentic resources, and also within the IPA, we have the comparing cultural perspectives, which is one of the 9 interpretive activities. And then, of course, in your interpersonal and presentational, kind of connecting those activities to real life. And finally, the IPA uses rubrics for each of the 3 parts. So the interpretive has a rubric, interpersonal, and presentational. And of course, the rubrics are based on the performance level, novice, intermediate, advanced.
Okay, so what an IPA isn't. An IPA is not meant to be busy work. It's not something that you want to leave for your kids to do on their own. Because they need feedback. They need someone to be there to go over the activities with them, provide them with the feedback so that they can use that to complete the next section. It is not a formative assessment. It's not something to use daily. It's not something you can do in a day. Because there are 3 parts to the IPA assessment. Generally speaking, when we give them, we will have them do the interpretive piece, whether it's a listening or a reading, in one day, because there are 9 activities that go with it. And then we will plan the writing for a separate day. And then the speaking, depending on the type of speaking that it is, can take a few days to get through if they're presentational speaking presentations, or if you're doing an interpersonal speaking, it might take you a day or so to get through those, but it's not something that you can do in a day. And also, it shouldn't be isolated. Isolated meaning a couple of different things. First of all of the parts of the IPA should relate. So whatever you use as your source for the listening or the reading should relate to what you're asking them to do in their speaking and what you're asking them to do in their writing. It should be, like circular, to where each piece helps them with the next. Also, you don't want to give them a reading over ordering food in a restaurant and then asking them to have a conversation about their school schedule and having them write about going on vacation. You want all of the pieces to connect and to work together to build on each other.
Okay, so how to use the IPAs. So you first want to design a thematic unit. So choose your theme, whether that theme is food, the environment, school. Write your essential questions. So what do you want the students to be able to do at the end of that unit? And again, you can write your essential question before you find your source, or sometimes you can find your IPA source and then get ideas for your question. So those two steps can be switched. So it just kind of depends. So implementing backwards design by creating your IPA first. So starting with your interpretive, filling out the template with the activities, thinking of a interpersonal task and a presentational task. And then once you have your IPA created, go back and figure out what kind of sources, similar sources, you would like to use for your formative practice on, for your daily lessons. Creating those daily lessons that build the vocab. So what theme vocabulary do you want to focus on? And the grammar. So what kind of grammar functions will the students need to be able to do in order to complete your interpersonal and your presentational tasks? And finally, you're providing feedback throughout this whole entire process. You're encouraging the students to self-reflect and also evaluate themselves on the rubric is important, or the rubrics, excuse me.
And when you're using the IPA, when we talk about creating your daily lesson activities, you don't have to do IPA every day, all day. It's, if you have a practice IPA, you can incorporate it into several days. You can extend it out for a week, even longer. So it's not that either of us are using IPAs every day, all day. But when we do additional activities in our classroom, we're still working with the same vocab and grammar.
So again, by you creating this thematic unit, you're recycling the vocab, you're recycling the grammar. So the students feel prepared to take that IPA. And again, that interpretive source is something they have never seen before, but still related to the theme.
And when we talk about grammar, one of the things that we both do is we do what we call pop-up grammar, where sometimes the kids are looking at the actual authentic resource itself and they'll say, well, what is this? What is this word? Why does it look that way? Why is there an accent on this ending? What does it mean? And we use that as an opportunity, a teaching opportunity to say, oh, that's a great question. That's actually something called the preterite tense. And so, sometimes the grammar that comes up is based off of questions that the kids have. Okay, so what source is best for an IPA? So one of the things that we look for is an authentic source. And as Elaine mentioned earlier, this is something that is made by a native speaker for a native speaker. And, we do our best to find something that is level appropriate, whether it's novice, intermediate, or advanced, but yet still have it made by a native speaker for a native speaker. Sometimes we'll find a resource that we could use in all three levels. We can make it novice, we can make it intermediate or advanced. Sometimes we'll find something that we know we can use in the novice level, and then we can use it for a variety of activities as well. So we try to recycle our resources and make sure that we can use them several times for several activities if we can. And sometimes when you find a resource, it's connected to, if you find a reading, it's connected to a video, or you can find a YouTube channel related to that article. So, sometimes we get lucky and one of our resources will lead us to the next. You want to pick things that are engaging to the students, that grab their attention, that are of interest to them, that are current, pop culture. You also want to make sure that the resource that you find is going to help answer your essential question. And one of the big things you have to make sure is that there's enough content. We can sometimes find infographics and they're really great and the pictures are bright and colorful and they're really interesting looking, but there's very little content. And if it doesn't have enough print content, then sometimes you can't create a full IPA. Maybe that's one that you tuck away to use for a daily activity, but it's just not enough for the IPA itself. So just because you find something and it doesn't necessarily have enough for the IPA, you don't have to get rid of it. It's always something you could tuck away and use later. And then you also want to find something that can be linked to the presentational and interpersonal activity. So the more that you can get out of the resource that you find, the better. And, example would be if you had a menu or a travel brochure, what can you do with that menu that would become the interpersonal, that would then become the presentational? Can it be linked to the other two modes, the activities that you're doing in the other two modes? Here they are. So here are some examples of some of the resources that we have used in our IPAs. If you look at the infographic, this is one Elaine used for an IPA that she created on technology. And so this is an example of what an infographic would look like. And if you see, it has the 10 ideas on there, and they're illustrated, which is helpful for the novice level. Anytime there, you can find an infographic that has additional photos on there to help them understand the content, the better. And then when the, let's see, this is the Instagram one, so the technology. So obviously kids are all into technology, like anything related to Instagram or Snapchat. So it's engaging, and you created this one, so picking it for linking it to your essential question. Obviously then would help you lead to the interpersonal speaking and presentational writing. The one next to it is an article from the Tomatina. This is the article that I used back in August with my kids. We did a unit on the Tomatina, and every year they come up with a poster advertising the Tomatina. And I saw this Game of Thrones themed poster, and the first time I showed it, the kids right away knew, oh, it's Game of Thrones. They knew, and it was probably one of my favorite units that I did. I think the kids really enjoyed it, and this website was a great website because they could really go through and explore. They can watch videos, they could see photos. It really kept them engaged, and it gave me a lot of content, everything from the history to the current events and the schedule of events and everything. Then the other two were videos. One of them was from an IPA that I did on women in space. I did Elena Ochoa. And this one was like a Scholastic Weekly video, about a minute and 45 seconds. It's very slow but clear. We try to pick videos that, that the kids can clearly understand. And then the other one was yours that you had picked.
I believe that was from a sports IPA. So it's tips to enjoy the World Cup with family. I believe this was a novice IPA, if I remember correctly. So again, I believe it's a little bit slower. The vocab, definitely the theme, the family, the sports vocab is very clear. So the accents are easy to understand.
Yeah. And, when we create an IPA, so for example, for the Elena Ochoa video, the video was in one part IPA, and then I had an infographic on her her career, going all the way back to her education and her career and the medals that awards that she won. So the infographic and the video supported each other. And then with the Tomatina article or the Tomatina website, there was a video from Orlando Tomatoes that was like my catch. I used that to grab their attention. And then I used a video of an interview. Someone was interviewing people that had just participated in the Tomatina. So I used that as the listening element. So everything kind of related. And then my goal for the kids was for them to be able to talk about how they would prepare to go participate in the Tomatina.
Yeah, so everything connects. And like Melissa mentioned, especially with the Tomatina, with the website, there were other resources on the website to use in formative activities. So you're going to kind of create that holistic unit. Okay, so creating the IPA, filling out the template. So this is the interpretive piece. So again, you're choosing either a written source or an audio source. So again, going back to the previous slide, an infographic or an article for a written source, or if you choose to use an audio source, a short video. The 9 interpretive activities, I don't believe I mentioned them before, but it's the ACTFL template. It starts with keyword recognition, main idea, supporting details, organizational features, guessing meaning from context, inferences, author's purpose or perspective, comparing cultural perspectives, and the personal reaction from the text. So for the IPAs that we do, if we are doing a novice one, all our instructions are in English for each one of those 9 sections. The keywords, supporting details, and personal reaction are in the target language. So the students are providing their answers in the target language. So the keywords, we're putting the word in English. The students have to find the Spanish word if it's a written source. Audio, we've done a couple different things as far as keyword recognition. Sometimes we'll have a group of 3 terms. One of them will be mentioned, the other 2 not, and then the students have to check which term is mentioned. Sometimes we'll just give them maybe 15 terms and 10 of them are mentioned in the video and they have to check the 10. So for our audio source, we've done keyword recognition a couple different ways. Supporting details, so they're pulling out a detail, or excuse me, we're giving them details. Some are mentioned, some aren't. They have to provide the information on the line. And then the personal reaction, we're asking them a question about the source. And they're answering that in the target language. So again, those are connected sentences. And the personal reaction is not graded, but your question should help prepare them for the interpersonal piece or the presentational piece if it's written. The main idea, organizational features, inferences, guessing meaning, author's purpose, and comparing cultural perspectives, the students actually answer in English. On the intermediate side, there's a couple differences. We put the instructions in the target language. And then other than that, all of the other activities are similar to the novice, or they're just, of course, you're choosing a source that's a little bit higher level.
Right. So did we go, the cultural comparison is in Spanish, right?
Oh, okay.
Intermediate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I missed that part. I'm sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the cultural comparison part of it too is where we try to bring in the product, practice, perspective, idea. And in that section, we brainstorm with them ahead of time. Okay, what is the overall perspective of this topic or this theme? And then what are the practices that go along with that, and what products did they use within those practices? So, we do help them prepare ahead of time for the cultural comparison, and we encourage them to think and brainstorm ahead of time for that, so that they can make the connections in that section. And sometimes we will give them the first 7 sections and one day if the listening or the reading article happens to be longer in length. And then we will have them do the cultural comparison and the personal reaction to the text the next day. If it's a short video or a short reading, then they can usually do the 9 activities in one day. But, every now and again, we do have to add in that extra day depending on the actual resource itself.
I did want to jump in and mention, if your interpretive source is a listening, they listen more than one time. So in the past, we have actually put the video on Edge Elastic, and they have, the class period to listen really as many times as they want, but they need to finish those activities within that time frame. So we've done different ways with videos. In the past, we also just used to let them, or we would show the video from our computer a certain number of times with pauses. But the video, they're not watching just one time. They really, these activities are quite detailed, so they're going to need to go back to the source.
Our kids are 1-to-1, so they all have a Chromebook. So we ask them to make sure that they bring a charged Chromebook with their earbuds, and then we give them a chance to use Edge Elastic. That way they can listen to the video however many times they want. They can pause it, they can go back. But because they're in Edge Elastic, they can't exit out of it. They're on the video the whole time, but they can move at their own pace. All right, ready? Okay, so once they're done with the interpretive part of the test, and you've given them some feedback about that section of the test, that part of the test, you can go into the interpersonal. So the interpersonal has two options. It could be an interpersonal writing or an interpersonal speaking. For interpersonal writing, some of the things that we have done is we've asked them to respond to an email, and you can decide if you want your email to be formal or informal. We make sure that they're prepped ahead of time with a practice so that they can practice how to greet and how to close an email. If we do a travel blog, for example, this one that we did for an IPA where they read a travel blog, and then the interpersonal part of it was that they wrote a blog comment. They made comments on the blog. They responded to other people's comments, and they were comments made by native speakers, and we were able to take those and turn them into the interpersonal writing. You could do a response to a series of text. You can have them, you could give them the text ahead of time and they have to respond to them. You can have two students work together to write to each other, whether it's one sitting in front of the other and passing the paper back and forth, however you want to set them up for working side by side, but they're not talking. I have found a lot on Twitter. I have found that there are certain hashtags that I can use, and I can get, tweets from people. One of my hashtags that I like to use is like the Cuando era niño hashtag. And you can find what people say that they used to do when they were young. And then we can ask our kids to read some of those tweets and then respond with what they used to do as a child. You could, whatever topic that you're studying, what can you find that they could respond to, making sure that obviously they're appropriate, school appropriate tweets that they could respond to, or you can have them tweet back and forth to each other. You could send them a tweet and they could respond to you. And then obviously commenting on, responding to, or reacting to an Instagram picture. Again, using it, school appropriate comments and photos that you can find. But they could make comments on photos. You could have them add comments to a photo that's on there. You can have them create the dialogue bubbles or the speech bubbles, and have them create the dialogue between the two characters in a photo. Depending on how creative you want to get with that, that's an option. Interpersonal speaking, groups of two or with the teacher. And if they're in groups of two, you could have them make just a video. We recently started using Flipgrid with the kids and having them have a conversation and record themselves. And then I went back and watched them. I've had them do a conversation live, and I've sat with them before. And I've also spoke with them one-on-one. The tasks that you have them do are based on the language functions and vocabularies that they'd practiced or rehearsed. So if the unit is over what they used to do or what they were like as a kid, then obviously that's what you want them using the imperfect tense to describe what they were like and tell you what they used to do. It should be a new task within familiar context. So it should not be something that they that they've already been assessed over or they've already worked through. You want it to be a new task based off of the familiar context. Also, at the novice level, we do give them practiced or a question sometimes ahead of time that they could practice. So we might give them 10 questions and say, okay, these are the things that you need to be able to answer within your dialogue. At the intermediate level, it's some practiced or memorized questions, but we also do role playing or debate. If you do role playing or debate, you don't always know what the next person's going to say. So it's not so much of an interview as it is more like on the spot.
Do we want to address the question?
Oh, sure. Do you recommend any book to read about how to create an IPA?
So going back, ACTFL came up with the IPA. So I believe it's ACTFL Appendix F is the template. ACTFL does have a book on how to create the IPA that gives examples and goes through all of the different sections, and you could see examples from all different languages. So that's the only book that I can think of would be the ACTFL one on how to create.
It would probably be the most detailed, the most thorough. I know there are a lot of blogs that are out there, teachers that blog that will tell you how they create their IPAs. But I think that because the idea of the IPA was created with ACTFL, through ACTFL, and they are the ones that created the template, their book would be one of the best resources. There's also the Carla is a website, and Carla is an abbreviation, and I can't recall the whole abbreviation off the top of my head.
Okay, there's Teacher Discovery linked the ACTFL book.
Yes.
In the chat. Yeah, that's the right one. Yep, Implementing the Integrated Performance Assessment. Yes, that's the title.
Yep. Okay. On to presentational. Sure.
Okay, so presentational is the last piece of the Integrated Performance Assessment, and that too can either be a speaking or a writing. So presentational speaking is practice and rehearse. So just as you're giving a presentation, you would spend time on it, you would practice it, and it's for an audience. So in the presentationals that we have done in class, the students have gotten up in front of their classmates. We've also done videos too, create your own cooking video, but the idea is that people are going to be watching it. The use of visual aids, we've done, Google Slides in the past, PowerPoint, we've had the students bring in an object and talk about it. And again, the ideas there, which I think I kind of already mentioned, but role playing, and again, that role playing is practice and rehearsed, a speech, telling a story, describing a poster or flyer, making a video. On the other hand, we have the presentational writing. So that could be an article for a newspaper, magazine, or website. So again, for an audience, creating an infographic, a brochure, flyer, menu, or an advertisement. So the difference between the presentational and the interpersonal is that the presentational is they have time to prepare and to practice, whereas the interpersonal is spontaneous, on-the-spot communication.
All right. Okay, so once they're done with each of the sections of the test, there is a rubric. ACTFL has created rubrics for each of the tasks. The rubrics are based on the proficiency level of the students. So there's a novice rubric, an intermediate rubric, advanced rubric. And the rubrics that ACTFL created are really nice because on the front side, it gives you an opportunity to evaluate them, but then on the back there's a section for self-evaluation that the students can fill out. So it's important to encourage your students to self-evaluate on the rubric. Sometimes they're their own worst critic, but if you've recorded them, if they've made a video, give them a chance to go back and watch their video. Let them watch their interpersonal speaking or their presentational speaking, and then have them self-evaluate so that they can see, what they did well and what they want to go back and improve for the next time. And then, self-correcting during formative activities. So, when you're doing activities in class, you really want to help and encourage them for self-correction. A lot of times they'll say something, they'll do something, they'll say, oh, that didn't sound right. And, they'll work it through, giving them, the guidance that they need to make that self-correction, letting them help each other, even if it's, in peer evaluations. Practice providing evidence and making justifications with your students. So, one of I think the things that they sometimes have a hard time with is finding the evidence or justifying the answer choices that they have made. So they can look at the author's purpose and they can tell you, oh, this is definitely the purpose is, we usually give them 3, we at the novice level anyways, we'll say, to inform, to persuade, and to entertain. And the kids will say, oh, for sure, this was meant to entertain me, but they can't tell you why. What was the actual evidence from the piece? Well, it was to entertain me because I'm reading a fable, and there are, characters, and there's a plot, and there's a moral at the end of the story. So helping them find the evidence within the text, and especially being able to take that evidence out and put it into their own words, or even, getting them out of the habit of writing quotes in Spanish, and telling them, take the Spanish and put it into your own words in English. I don't think they could ever get enough practice with doing that, finding the evidence, and ask them, okay, highlight the evidence, underline the evidence. What did you use text-wise to determine that detail is included? What did you use to determine that inference statement is true or false? And have them highlight it, underline it, because chances are they'll start to see a connection. They'll see that the key words from the interpretive are near the evidence for the details, and then the keywords and the details come together to help form the support for the other
That's really the goal of the IPA too, starting with those keywords. Okay, now you found the keywords. The keywords are going to help you find the details and help you find the main idea. So really working with your students and helping them see that all these pieces of the IPA are connected.
Yeah. And then foster collaboration and cooperative learning to prepare for the interpersonal and presentational tasks. If the students are going to be working together, giving them a chance to, practice working together, helping each other with what they're going to be doing, whatever task you're asking them to do, learning how to support one another during a speaking. Like, if you realize your partner's struggling a little bit, what could you do to help pull them along? So giving them a chance to practice or even just work together ahead of time before they're doing the other tasks that they need to do together.
Yeah, and that peer feedback, I think we mentioned earlier too. And, I think as one student is talking, maybe the listener has a checklist and they could be listening for, certain content goals and things like that to really, keep both students on task, but also give them feedback on their, performance, whatever activity is helping you, work toward your IPA.
And they're usually pretty good and honest with each other. My students are currently working on speaking presentations about their hobbies and their pastimes. And, on Tuesday, I had them get together in small groups and I had them give their presentations to 3 other people first before they got up and presented in front of the whole class. And each of the other students had a checklist, like Elaine mentioned, and they had to check off, did they have this? Did they answer this in their presentation? Did they answer this? And, when they were done, they gave that feedback to the speaker, and then that speaker was able to take that feedback and go through and make any last minute changes and adjustments to their presentation. And I was really impressed with how the kids would say, well, you did a really nice job of doing this, but, I suggest that you change this or you move this idea here. So they're pretty honest with each other as well.
Okay, so now we're on to why use the integrated performance assessment. So first and foremost, it really organizes your curriculum into units by cultural theme. So we do a cultural theme each quarter, and then the IPA is near the end of the quarter, so that the time in between, we're introducing the theme, we're doing an attention grabber, we're working with the theme vocab, we're introducing them to the grammar functions that they need in order to, interpret the interpretive sources on that theme, and also to use those grammar functions in their presentational and interpersonal. So it really helps you organize, and you're organizing not only by theme, but also by essential question. And that essential question or questions, you have clear goals for your students. You post those essential questions so the students know as soon as they walk in, when you start a new theme, this is what I'm going to be able to do, and this is what I'm going to be able to say and write about by the end of the quarter. If you, especially for novice students, 1 theme per quarter might be enough. More advanced students, you might be able to do 2 themes a quarter. So it just kind of depends, on the level of your students. And then it teaches the grammar and the vocab in context, not in isolation, which is nice. So you are taking that, looking at all of your sources, not only the ones you're using for the one you're using for your IPA, but also the other sources that relate to the same theme that you're using for your daily lessons, and pulling out, okay, what theme vocab is repeated in these sources, what grammar is in these sources. What grammar do the kids need to be able to speak and write in order to answer these essential questions? So those are the first couple reasons on why to use the IPA.
So another thing, a benefit of using the IPAs is that they use authentic resources. I think that's my favorite part. I love looking for authentic resources. I'm always on the lookout. I find them, as much as I possibly can when I'm out and about. I grab maps from, I grabbed Spanish language maps when we're out and about, different areas. I grab menus, I grab any tourist brochures. My daughter brought home a whole bunch of stuff from Washington, D.C. that she grabbed that was in Spanish for me. And I really enjoy using authentic resources when I'm out traveling. If I'm in Spain, I bring things home that the kids can use. I know that I can relate to real world tasks. And, we try to design activities for them to do that they may actually have to do. You're in an airport, you lost your luggage. What are you going to do? Okay, here you are, you're in Madrid. These are the sites that you want to see. You need to figure out how to get on the metro and which metro stops to get off. So you want to give them tasks that they may encounter someday, learning how to find housing, how to find an apartment. Maybe one day they're going to go to college and they're going to go do study abroad. So now they can find themselves housing. So you want to give them real world tasks. Ordering food in a restaurant is one of the biggest things then, and they can go to a local restaurant then in your town, your city, and order in Spanish. So, giving them the authentic resources to practice and then their tasks. It allows you to provide meaningful feedback to them. Even when you're doing your formative practice activities, you're providing feedback. You're having them practice giving justification and evidence. You're providing feedback on, how to properly greet somebody, whether it's formally or informally. So it allows for a lot of feedback for growth, and then builds their confidence towards language learning, giving them the confidence that they need to go and have an authentic conversation, authentic dialogue.
And also what's nice about the IPA is they're not afraid to look at those authentic resources. I feel like when we first started using them in our classrooms, the students were a little shocked and kind of taken back by, oh my gosh, I have to know every single word. Well, no, you don't.
Right.
You don't need to know every single irregular verb in the preterite tense to be able to interpret and understand an article or, a blog post or something like that. So it really builds their confidence into looking at something authentic and diving right into it rather than, being like, oh gosh, there's no way I could be able to understand what this is saying. So I think that's the biggest benefit of the IPA, at least what I've seen in my classroom, is that the students are not afraid to dive in and look at something.
All right, ready?
Okay, so Melissa and I are...
Sorry. Too many times. There we go. Okay.
So Melissa and I are author and co-author of some Teachers Discovery products. So we just wanted to kind of go over those so you can check them out. The first, Listo's IPA Packs. So they are organized by cultural theme with the essential questions. There are suggestions for pop-up grammar lessons based on the interpretive sources. And the IPA Pack, we actually have 2 interpretive sources with the 9 activities for the IPA. So you'll have a written source, the 9 activities for the IPA, and also an audio source, the 9 activities. After those 2 interpretive sources, we have an interpersonal task and also a presentational task. And we have both. So for example, with the interpersonal task that we have created as a writing, we also have a suggestion for speaking in case you wanted to go that route. Same with the presentational. And the rubrics are included with the IPA Packs. But the IPA Packs are just the IPA. But like I said, it's by theme and already has essential questions written for you.
And like Elaine mentioned, one of the things that we do is suggested pop-up grammar. So like she said before, you're not asking them to memorize the irregular conjugation of 50 verbs in the preterite, but instead you're asking them to look at and understand the 10 or 15 preterite verbs that are within your piece. And there's a pretty good chance that there's a variety within there. They can see that, oh, this is what a regular verb looks like. This is an irregular verb. So it gives you a chance to address the grammar in maybe 5-10 minutes. We give you some suggestions on how to do that, but it's not a full formal grammar lesson.
And the rubrics that are included are based on the ACTFL, but they are broken down for, you know, novice, intermediate, advanced. So they're a little bit more, I'd like to think they're a little bit more user-friendly. They're not as wordy. So hopefully that's helpful for both you and the students.
One of our newer products that we started doing were thematic units, excuse me, and it's a whole unit that you could use throughout the quarter. And the unit is designed over a series of essential questions, and there are a mixture of authentic written as well as audio resources. So you'll have a variety of, excuse me, sorry, a variety of activities. You'll have several videos, you'll have infographics, you'll have articles, you'll have websites. Do you want to talk about this? So I can grab water.
So the difference between the IPA Packs and the thematic unit is the thematic unit has everything you need for your quarter, basically. So it starts off with by the unit. So for example, celebrations or you know, food or housing, and then the essential questions, and then you'll have your suggested vocab, grammar pop-ups, a variety of IPA-like activities based on similar sources, and then you have your full IPA assessment at the end of the unit. This IPA assessment contains either a listening or a listening or a reading, and then your interpersonal, either speaking or writing, presentational speaking or writing, and then the rubrics as well.
So like I did a unit on celebrations. And so within that unit, there's, I covered everything from Day of the Dead to Reyes Magos to the Feria de las Flores. I tried to make it so there was something from Mexico, something from Spain, something from the Caribbean. So we also try to find resources from several different countries so that they're getting the culture as well as the theme. So what does, you know, a celebration in Spain look like versus Mexico? And then, you know, within the pop-up grammar, we do give practice activities that they can do.
Websites for further practice, things like that.
So that the activity, there's enough in there to get you through the full quarter, and then at the end, you know, give your summative assessment. Okay.
Okay, so it looks like we've reached the end here. So on this slide, we have our contact information, as well as other websites that we are on. We both have shared our Pinterest, where we find and post a lot of the authentic resources. If you are implementing the IPA in your classroom, I highly recommend a Pinterest board, because you can add it to your Chrome toolbar, and you could just find a good website and post it right to your Pinterest. So check out our Pinterest. We already have a lot of things posted, a lot of authentic resources that might be of interest to you as you are creating your own units. And feel free to email us with any questions that you have at the end of the presentation, or something that you're thinking of as you're creating your own unit in your classroom. And it looks like we have a little bit of time. So if you would like to type a question to us now, we would have some time to answer that.
And then if you also, where we like the Pinterest board, it's we post from some of our favorite sites where we find our resources. So, you know, the sites that we use to find our infographics, and you know, some of our YouTube channels that we subscribe to or that we follow to find videos. We link the posts into our Pinterest, and we both organize by topic. So those are there as well. So if there's any questions, we're more than happy to answer them. And the I know we referred to the appendix for the, you know, creating the the IPAs, and that is an appendix that's on the ACTFL website. And then it's actually a template that we've modified ourselves a little bit. But, you know, we don't, you know, we stick to the activities, but, you know, we sometimes change the format of them, but that's the basis of it. So it's in one of the appendix if you're looking for the template that we use.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And again, if you have any additional questions now or in the future, please feel free to email us.